And at that point, I kind of just got the download. Like, I think the best thing I can do with my life is support the people who protect the traditional ecological knowledge of forests.
Today we are here with my friend and colleague, Sophia Rokhlin, host of Ma Earth's Learning Lab. Very excited for this conversation. Welcome into the hot seat, Sophia.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been a long time coming. Yeah.
It has been a long time coming.
It has
We've
indeed.
never actually done this.
A decade or so, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, something
I can't
like
wait
that.
to get into that whole journey and arc. We find ourselves today at the end of Climate Week.
Yes.
You threw a really fun little garden party last night for Ma Earth.
Thank you.
How are you feeling? How are you doing?
I feel a bit like the tail end of a comet, just kind of sputtering out into the darkness. But yeah, just like illuminated. It was amazing. It's great to connect with colleagues. And I think we've been in the Zoomiverse for, a couple of years now. So it's just great to really, honestly, just exchange pheromones and stories and see people's little gestures and understand the people that we work together with. Yeah. So.
Yeah, so this was a reunion of sorts for the Ma Earth team, but also first time that we got to meet even some of our collaborators in person. The team has been growing. There's kind of roughly 10 of us working on Ma Earth now.
Yeah.
So very special from that perspective.
Yeah. And as you very well know, I think syncing up time zones is an interesting task. So yeah, just great to, and I think we have a sweet rapport. I think we're coming from different backgrounds, some of us more technical, obviously on the engineering side, and myself being more on the land rights and stewardship side. And it's just really interesting to see the kind of intersecting circles that we're creating, and it just makes sense. I think what like previously seemed like discrete categories are actually like coming into some sort of a synthesis, and that feels progressive in a world where sometimes things don't feel like they're moving that much. So
yeah. And you are an epitome of so many of those different intersections and circles. You've come in weaving community, relationships with land projects. You're also doing the Learning Lab content offering. You hosted interviews here at Climate Week.
Yeah.
Our first Spanish interview.
Yes,
Very excited about that. And yeah, so like you're definitely one of those collaborators and team members who has a lot of different pieces that you work on and touch. Yeah,
definitely. And I think in your words, I think it plays to, I don't know if this is the right thing, but like my genius, I think I've been kind of slotted in categories where I'm like, okay, I can be in service here, grant writing or development or this, but I feel really that I kind of like have 1,000 hands and arms doing 1,000 things at the same time. And it's great. There's not a dull moment. Yeah.
So it's been about a year since you've started working with us and Ma Earth. We've been working together, but our journey of knowing each other goes way further back. But I want to go all the way back and just kind of hear the story of Sophia Rokhlin. Like, where are you from?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? What were your early influences?
Yeah, great. Gestation or intergenerational.
Inception,
or
ancestors.
Totally. Great. So past lives. Okay. Well, it's so funny. Like, anytime you can kind of put a little stake in what makes sense to share, like where do you pivot your flag from? But I'm born and raised in New York. So these cities, like the streets are my home. I know the sound of like the kind of harmony of the subway that comes by and the pigeons. And at some point, I just started to feel like not very good here. I love the city. I honor its mystery and labyrinthine opportunities. And it's kind of like Burning Man, like you can go on any adventure in many cases. But yeah, I started to, I guess when I was in college, I went to Occupy Wall Street, and I, was feeling the energy of the space, walking around Zuccotti Park, and basically, I just started to be in connection with some elders of Turtle Island in that space who were kind of protesting, what extractivism represented. And I think for me that started to turn some wheels. And I got glimpses into a more maybe holistic worldview, that wasn't necessarily predicated on success being about capital gain, et cetera, but maybe more about the quality of water, soil, et cetera, which I hadn't had any exposure to, growing up. And I followed that thread, and that brought me to studying, I guess, kind of putting myself in a niche slot called ethnobotany. So, it's botany, but it's also the study of people's applications of plants or relationships with plants. One thing led to another, and I ended up with a little piece of paper with some guy's email written on it. It was like a, at hotmail.com kind of vibe. And he said, if you find yourself in Quito Airport, I will bring you deep into the Amazon rainforest, and you can meet the Secopai people, the Sequoia people. And mind you, psychoactive plants such as, let's say, ayahuasca, weren't Googleable at the time.
Right. Roughly what years are we?
2012. 2012.
Fitting.
It had to be, yeah. And I remember going into a Barnes and Noble and looking up a butterfly catalog and making up an address for my mom, like, Mom, I'm going to go here. And I did that, and I ended up visiting, a community called the Secopai, or the Sequoia people. So when I was about 19, I was waitressing on the side at a restaurant in the Upper East Side, just stacking a little cash and then going out to the forest when I could. And, I went there, I think, with, I guess, the sort of exotic, touristic, wow, this is so interesting, but following a thread, a deeper query. And the Secopai people live in the northeastern Ecuadorian Amazon. They're about 650 people in the Ecuadorian side. They also have a community in Peru. And for context, the Amazon rainforest is, they say it's the most biodiverse terrestrial ecosystem, so not the ocean. But we find 10% of known species, plant species in the Amazon. And in 1 hectare of land in Yasuni National Park, you find more plant and animal species than you do in the entire North American continent. So it's just this proliferation. I mean, you've been to the forest. I don't know if you have any reflections on it, but just the diversity rewired me. Yep. And I think, I don't know if you've had a similar experience with that, and it's beautiful and it's awful, full of awe, to realize then, the state of peril that those territories are in. So my first time driving into, Secopai territory, I mean, I spent hours and hours driving past oil palm fields for palm oil production, which at the time the IMF was kind of touting as the new green opportunity for, as it's called, a flex crop, because it's, it can be used as a food, a fuel, a feed. It's an industrial cosmetics. And it's very kind of it can adjust to market needs and changes and flexibilities. So this was pretty devastating to see what we call silent forests, driving by, if you don't know trees, it just looks like a forest, right? But there's no biodiversity there. The soils are degraded. The working conditions are troublesome, So yeah, I think I got a real reality check, and I kind of spiraled into a deep pool of grief for, I don't know, a year or something, then just returning back to New York and seeing this matrix and kind of, for the first time, realizing how abstracted all of these materials are, are kind of metabolized material ecology. Where does the metal come from? Where does the glass come from? And suddenly just trying to see past all of the kind of, the commodification and the built-upness of life. So that obviously required a lot of psychic recalibration. And at that point, I kind of just got the download. I think the best thing I can do with my life is support the people who protect the traditional ecological knowledge of forests, And so then I did a check, what what tools do I have? What privilege can I leverage, right, in service of that? And that's kind of been my path since, just like picking up little pieces, like learning Spanish. I did a master's in something called ecological economics at a great university called ICTA, UAB, Autonomous University of Barcelona. I studied with Georgios Kallis, who is kind of a leader in the degrowth movement, Joan Martinez Allier, who studied environmentalism of the poor. And just kind of pollinated my mind with a lot of the critical discourse around mainstream environmentalism, corporate environmentalism, which I feel grateful for. I think it kind of equips me with a bit of a skeptical eye whenever walking into events such as Climate Week, and even just putting like an anthropologist's hat on, it's just fascinating to observe the discourses and what people might call like the political ecology. What are the underlying assumptions and values that are driving certain discourses and value placement around, let's say, natural resources, right? Water, soil, trees, et cetera. So that's been the journey. Yeah.
I love it. and this thread around the plants, the ethnobotany, going down to the jungle, like, I know you to have this unabashed love affair with plants ever since I've met you, and can you share more on that?
Okay, plants. Like there is a deceased teacher named Frank Cook. He lived and practiced in the Appalachian Mountains, where I now live in Southeast Appalachia, so in Asheville. And Frank would talk about, I heard students of his telling the story of him talking about the green screen. So before you know the names of things or you have relationships with things, it all just kind of looks like one thing, right? And I grew up with the green screen. It was just like green is green, right? Different shades of green. When you begin to learn the names of things or give names to things, and you suddenly have associative memories built around these things, right, or beings, right, with their own evolutionary stories of pressure and change and adaptation, because each plant tells a story of different time, right, deep time. I mean, it's truly incredible if you think about it. And their shapes have adapted depending on wind, texture, sound, different creatures mingling with them and shaping their form. It's incredible to me. I can trip out hard on it. No pun intended. And yeah, so I think plants just like I tether myself to the botanical world to make sure I don't get too caught on the anthropocentrism that is rife in our kind of worldview, and Michael Pollan writes about this very eloquently in The Botany of Desire. Maybe plants are the ones actually running the show. Evolutionarily, they've had a much longer time to kind of test things out, right? The rate that we're going, we're burning ourselves out a little bit, along with our whole, big pack of our relatives, insects, amphibians, our whole family of creatures. But plants are doing a great job. And so, yeah, I think like for my own sanity, frankly, just kind of spending time and listening with the plants has been helpful in rooting me to a deeper vision of time. Because this myopic, human-centered, human supremacist story that we're in is just not really inspiring, to be honest with you. It's kind of boring. It's kind of monocultured, right? It really is. And so if we're talking about valuing diversity, who's diversity, And then if you want to get even deeper, it's like you can think about like the gut flora, right? I mean, I realize it is maybe not the same kingdom, but it's the same concept. Like we're inhabited by many different beings, the border of the I-ness, who's the we, do we include these plants in it? Like we have similar characteristic traits, but I think expanding our aperture to include other beings is gonna, I feel our salvation may depend on it to a certain extent, And as far as the plants go, I mean, like, living in the Amazon rainforest, I was super privileged to get to live in Peru and Ecuador for about 3-ish years leading up to COVID. And, spending time with friends and elders who are from the forest. And the worldview is different. The worldview is super different. It's like there's a whole university of studying and learning with plants. And this is the botanical science of learning the medicine of plants. And so in this tradition of dieta, or in, Shipibo, they call it sama, different cultures have different names for it, but it vaguely follows the kind of framework of you go into a context of fasting, of abstinence, and you make an agreement with a plant. And this doesn't have to be a psychoactive plant. It can be, but sometimes people call them master plants of the rainforest. And, folks become students of these plants. And if you're not eating, if you're kind of in a state where you've renounced the pleasures of life and you're really just only with the sun and the water, you start to notice shifts in your perception, in your sense, in your dreams. And it's thought that this is how people really learned about the qualities of plants or with the qualities of plants. But it's an engagement, it's a marriage, it's a contract with the plants. So I'm an aspiring animist, as a colleague friend of mine, Cassie Thornton, says. I really like that.
Yeah,
I'm not, but I aim to be.
Yeah, it's, aspiring animist and aspiring activist.
Yeah, totally.
One of your gifts is your way with words, and I think anyone listening will already have picked that up. Where does that come from? Has that always been something? I mean, how much do you cultivate it? You're extremely well read and researched, but any other comments on that reflection?
My parents are not from the U.S. I think children of immigrants sometimes start digging different holes, or trying to find cultural kinship in places that maybe they don't have in their home. I'm an only child too. Don't make fun of me. And so I think I've had to find a lot of companionship in ideas and thoughts and creatures, whoever I can hang out with. And interestingly enough, in Romance languages, you get a gendered noun, right? So la planta, the female plant, right? Or the car or the boat or whatever it is. Everything has a gender. And I think bridging those worldviews, I kind of saw everybody as a he or a she. And I realized it's a bit of a binary, but I think that really actually did play an underlying role in my sense of, animacy and relatedness with the world. But words, at some point I remember just having a moment, sitting outside in the forest, maybe under the influence of some sort of a psychoactive substance. And I was like, wow, I'm a daughter of language. Wow, how cool. And I was just saying words and watching them kind of echo into the space in front of me. And it's trippy. And we just take it for granted. But the ability to use words to communicate specific things is I don't know, incredible. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, so we've covered the basics: gestation, plants, and words. We're making great progress here.
Yep, the ABCs.
You said you had this kind of download that you wanted to be in service to the traditional ecological knowledge and the guardians of the forests, and that a lot has kind of stemmed from that core insight or motivation. Maybe we can get a bit more into what have you been learning about that? What's alive for you on those threads? Maybe some of the work that you've been involved with and what you're noticing.
Yeah, wow. It's a big question, Well, we live in a very globalized world. I think that I've been very blessed to work with indigenous communities in the Amazon and beyond now. Yeah, there's a funny positioning that happens when you realize that you can be in the halls of the UN, but also in the forest with a community who's kind of recognizing the loss of one of their keystone species. And I think that there is an important role to play, if that is your happy place, to kind of bridge those worlds, communicate those realities, and really be in support. It takes falling in love first.
Say more.
You have to, I think this might be following a thread of Francis Weller, who writes about grief. And, it's like grief for what we might lose, grief for what we've already lost. I think I've really had to become a companion of grief in some of it, because it shows us what we love, and I've noticed that some of the most heart-centered activists, the most heart-centered strategists, wherever you want to put yourself in the category, it's like, have you had your heart broken? And do you keep allowing yourself to get your heart broken over and over again by the loss of land, by the loss of stories, by the loss of life? And it's kind of like it's like the car wash, you know what I mean? Like I need to wash it off, or else I start to get a little blurry and I don't know what I'm really up to. And I noticed that this might be a common denominator for some of the folks that I have the most professional and also just relative resonance with. So yeah, I think just as a kind of an indicator, what's really broken your heart in this world? What do you really love? And how can you tend to the breaking in those spaces? So that's more of kind of how I approach it from, because I'm not a top-down strategist. I don't think very long term, I'm really just in the present moment with people and what needs to happen. Even that's a funny term, what needs to happen, right? Like whose plan is it anyway, but what feels good, what feels right, what feels in right relation with the moment. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the land of the thread of supporting land stewards, really, and this is something that comes up in Learning Lab, right? We're using this language around land stewards, and maybe not everyone is even familiar with this. What is it to be a steward of land? I think the way that, and I'd love to hear how you kind of see it, you see people in relationship with land. You wake up in the morning at dawn and let the ducks out. You know when to pluck the horse chestnut out of the water that's kind of having an invasive relationship with the water. Right. You're tracking these things carefully in a way that an NGO over there isn't going to see. A multinational corporation over there isn't going to see. And this has to do with the metrics that we use as well. It's especially when we have the carbon vision, or how does Culture Hack Labs talk about the carbon myopia or something? It's carbon tunnel. Yeah, the carbon tunnel. It's if that's really our one indicator of health, we're missing bigger pictures. We're missing dynamic relationships that keep the thread of the world intact. So I've just seen the magic of traditional ecological knowledge, and it's the hill I'll die on to protect, It's so ancient. It's so, frankly, sacred for me. And yeah, I think just being in service to land stewards who hold those threads, who aspire to be again in right relationship with land again, is what we're going for, really supporting them, supporting their scale of operation, not trying to push it to be bigger, to have more impact, to do this or that,
right?
Respecting the autonomy and the sovereignty of these projects because they know what they need. And this is such a patronizing dynamic, and really the bureaucratic violence of large-scale nonprofit philanthropy and top-down corporate greenwashing schemes is essentially contracting, people who still live in right relationship with land to do work for them. I don't think it's the way. It is a way, but it doesn't feel right to align with. So I hope that, with this work that we're doing with Learning Lab and Ma Earth more broadly, we're really in service to place-based regeneration and earth tending. And I know you and I have connected over the years on this. I think we've both probably had our hearts broken open at wow, I've seen a desert turn green, you know, or like, oh my gosh, like these seeds are in the rainbow colors. I've never seen this before. Or, wow, they sing this song every full moon to remember the ancestors so that way they can remember the gestures of how they tended to the corn. You know, I mean, there's so many subtle intricacies, but when you see it, you feel it in your body. I don't know how to explain it, but it's cool, and I'm in service to that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm just thinking about this where I'm currently residing in a new space and watching the birds tuck themselves into this tree every night, like just same time every evening, and we watch them just like fly over and tuck themselves. And here I am trying to stay disciplined with my sleep schedule and my trackers and my, what was my sleep score last
your aura.
night? The blue light in the computer, these beautiful birds just go tuck themselves in and then wake up. And, you and I met. You'll recall more precisely. It was a funny little church in New York. And
I actually don't remember when we met. So
I just remember I reached out through a mutual friend and was reading your work, and you were like, "Oh yeah, I'm speaking at this thing," and it started, I think, on a panel, and then you were giving a talk or something. And this was 10 plus years ago, right? And you're incredibly, talented and wise for your years. And so I was like doubly impressed with how much you were channeling at such still a young age. I don't want to feel like I'm too much older than you, but I've got some years on you. And it was just kind of like this resonance with the paradigm you were coming from and the skill in which you were delivering it and bringing it. I guess that started our friendship. And then years later, I'm like, we should start a podcast.
There were whisperings of it, yes.
It took a few more years. No, really, we should do a podcast. Really cool that. But what made you say yes? Obviously, you've covered a lot of the motivation and intention with Ma Earth. But any other comments on now coming together over this last year with the team, with the work, like at this stage in your professional career and, where you're at, like what's bringing you into harmony and alignment with this? And obviously also you've joked with me a few times, like, are you really making me join a Web3 startup, Matthew?
I know. Sometimes I look at my to-do list and I'm like, I don't know about this. No, I'm here for it though. Yeah. I mean, I had the distinct pleasure and honor of working at Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, who is we're a friend organization of ours. It's a grassroots coalition of 30 plus indigenous organizations from the Ecuadorian and the Peruvian Amazon. And before that, I had been working with Rainforest Foundation US. So I'd been kind of like in this working closely with allies, using what I could use to move capital, support narrative building, just kind of bridging and, seeing where I was of service. In my limited observations, I've noticed that nonprofit fundraising is opaque, Byzantine, kind of like complicated sometimes. I mean, some of the reports you got to write, you're like, wow, how many metric tons of carbon? Like, okay, let me call the program director. And then, sorry, he's in like, the Guyana Shield, like he'll be back in 2 weeks. And I'm like, crap, like this was my life, right? Like just kind of reporting to the people who gave us funds to support us and doing the work we felt we needed to do in order to like survive, Some things about that didn't totally gel with me. And that's just a paradigm situation. That's not a project situation. And so something I've appreciated about your approach, and I think just, the refi space more broadly is, and even just, again, conversations around donut economics, degrowth, anything that kind of challenges the supremacy of GDP, as the kind of ultimate indicator of well-being for human civilization, but like also what about everybody else, you know, whose lives we depend upon as well. That's been interesting to me. And I haven't seen that many projects or initiatives that really marry together, again, that firm, broken-hearted courage of we're supporting land stewards, and also let's iterate upon the frameworks that are continuing to keep us in these kind of recursive loops of like the weirdness of philanthropy, the weirdness of capital accumulation, just these things that we know are not pushing forward. So I want to stay closer to that, and I want to keep learning in that space and growing in that space. And when we sit down around our table with our team, I'm like, yeah, we're doing it. You know, it's financial technology, but at the end of the day, it's like we're building for land stewards, and I couldn't be happier with that. So I'm on like a huge learning curve myself. I feel like I'm screaming on a roller coaster 70% of the time.
Only 70.
Yeah, well, you know.
For me, it's about 95, yeah.
Climate week, it's been 101%, absolutely. Right. But, you know, you gotta keep it interesting. And I also noticed, again, it's the kind of dirty car effect. Like I wasn't keeping it, I wasn't really learning a lot. The work started to feel a bit repetitive. Yeah, and we just got to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
And not for freshness sake, you know what I mean? But just like we see these systems aren't really moving the needle. Right. If you look at exponential curves, you know, and I mean, this is pretty dismal. If you look at the Civilization Research Institute's amazing report that they published in January, and it's called Reality Check. I kind of recommend everyone in the climate space reads it, you know, because you see these exponential curves of like fossil fuel extraction, you know, water pollution, rates of different cancers, et cetera. And not only despite the actions of climate activists, but sometimes in response to it, or like the curve rears its head and it kind of doubles down.
Totally.
You know, so despite the fact that we have wind, solar, hydropower energy now kind of more available, say what you will about each one, that hasn't put a dent in fossil fuel extraction, which we, you know, widely deemed as the main issue. So it's complicated, right? It's not so straightforward. It's not to put us in a place where we say we'll throw our hands up and not do anything, but just really check our methods. And I think we're really at a point where we really need to now check our methods.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I mean, our friend Hoke, also collaborator in this work, has been saying all week, like, if we're not contributing to something that's fundamentally a different paradigm, we're probably doing the wrong thing. You know, it's like just business as usual and iterative. So shifting gears a little, what is this Learning Lab?
Oh, Learning Lab.
What is this all about? Tell me more.
Well, we launched Learning Lab, I guess, earlier this year. And it's basically an online community interactive learning space where we're calling in land stewards from around the world to co-learn about skills and techniques for land regeneration. I think part of what I've really appreciated about your work before I joined with Ma Earth is like, I saw that you were doing narrative building. And even though you were talking to Web3 people and environmental lawyers and, you know, indigenous activists, it was like there was some mutual common denominator there. And I feel like with Learning Lab, we're continuing that kind of indexing or the building out of a library and a community where we dig deeper into these skills. You have interviews with folks all the time who get to kind of really tell their stories and the work that we do. We're pulling on those threads and those techniques and offering deeper dives into them. So we've had awesome sessions so far with friends and collaborators of ours. We just did one on biochar, which is like incredible organic alchemical technology, you know? We did a session on rights of nature and lessons learned in Aotearoa with our friend and colleague, Erin Matariki Carr, who's just like, wow. We've done a session on bioacoustic data monitoring with our friends and collaborators at Gainforest, exploring the possibility for data tracking in different ecosystems to verify, you know, changes in biodiversity over time. So kind of like putting really cool skills and tools in the hands of land regenerators. And we did one with my friend and former colleague Cameron Ellis on community mapping, which, these live webinars have we've started out humble, but we've had sometimes 100, people calling in from around the world, like Zimbabwe, like Sweden, freaking Californian desert. I don't know, like just, it's like very, very diverse, and people are asking questions and engaging. And I think it's supporting the continuity of that network intelligence. And we're seeing people exchange emails and contacts and ideas. And if we can do anything in that kind of mimetic space to support the proliferation of enthusiasm, ideas, skill sharing, solidarity, I feel like that's a cool thing to do. So that's Learning Lab. And we're learning with Learning Lab, so write to community@maearth.com if you have any, suggestions or requests. I try to reach out to like some of the world's leading experts in these fields, and oftentimes they're quite quiet, quiet and dignified presences who don't necessarily have a big social media following, but we're trying to get them on for an hour-long deep dive into the work that they do.
Yeah, it's so fun. There's so many levels to it. Like for me, starting with the podcast series and going around to the events in 2023 and 2024, I wanted to, like, part of what felt clear was that funding and financing for these land stewards is a huge constraint. And having kind of an interest and passion for how do we reform and reinvent some of those financial mechanisms. Like I wanted to really dive in with people in that field and space. But then I couldn't just do that. Like I had to talk about rights of nature and had to like talk to land stewards and some of the projects and communities and like, but then I was feeling just like, okay, this is, you got to kind of somewhat find a lane for my own sanity, even of like, what do I go deeper in to be useful? And so in my lens of it, like now we have, as part of this Ma Earth set of offerings in our little content studio, the Regeneration will be funded is really our series to go deep around these topics of regenerative finance. And Learning Lab is our offering for land stewards and earth regenerators, and really about those skills and story sharing and solidarity building and community building for that core constituency. And because there's an infinite amount of things to talk about, and we don't know the answers, so it's really matchmaking people in the community who are freely willing to share their stories and their learnings and teachings, and just, putting some lightweight technical scaffolding around being able to host high quality webinars, recording the videos, making them freely available on YouTube, putting the transcripts in. Shout outs to our colleagues, Dave and Ty, who are doing the video editing and the cover graphics. And we're just trying to make it high quality educational resources. We're maintaining a lean production budget and philosophy and kind of approach to it. But I think it's, how many have we done now?
At the end of Climate Week, 9.
9. Wow. Okay. So, starting to get our sea legs underneath us.
Yeah.
and can kind of see the pattern and not wanting it to be too formulaic, but wanting it to be something that's repeatable so that we can amplify this workout. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. And, something that I've appreciated about your approach with Regeneration Will Be Funded when it first launched 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah. Was, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember what the first permaculture principle is, but something along the lines of like observe a space before you observe, right? And I feel that the work you were doing with the narrative building and sense making around that was observing the field, right? That we've been swimming in and the conversations, and it's kind of it's like its own coherent body of work now. And it kind of reaches the right people. You know, we were having a conversation about like quantity. You know, when you live in a world of AI slop, it can be a little overwhelming. Like, okay, we're starting a media venture. Like, good luck, right? But luckily and unluckily, there's not a lot of money in regeneration right now. So, we'll see about that. Yeah, that's season 11 of Ma Earth. But yeah, I like appreciate the opportunity for us to just make small iterations, tracking from our colleagues, our coworkers, you know, our land stewards on the ground, and stay light and lean enough to really be responding. Because as soon as something becomes monolithic, it's not in service to change and adaptation, you know? So yeah, I'm digging it.
And I've surrounded you with all of these tall German developers, and
yes, the meetings are timely.
Yes, decentralized technology conversations, and because a lot of our team now in this moment is around product development, technical development, as we're working through the protocols and the platform to bring forth some experiments of connecting funding to land stewards. Obviously, you know, you weren't in the Web3 space in the Amazon rainforest. How's it? I don't even like at this stage to call it Web3 space. It's all mixing in so many different ways, decentralized, open source, different types of, you know, interoperable words to share here. But this more technological world, and software realm, like how is that processing for you? What are you noticing and learning?
You know, I'm kind of a strange bird in this respect. I think you'll know this because I've never shied away from these conversations. And I became I worked at a foundation in the past, and we received a cryptocurrency donation of a sizable amount. And I became the de facto crypto portfolio manager for our, you know, classic environmental nonprofit at a time in a year when it wasn't really like in the kind of main cultural zeitgeist, I guess. So, and that wasn't my first kind of brush with the blockchain space. But at the end of the day, you know, it's like I may not be able to keep up with, you know, the wireframes and the flows and the conversations and the amount of coffee you guys drink. But there's a quality of thinking that I appreciate and feels right to me. It's agile, it's flexible, it's creative, it's interrogating, you know, what is taken granted for. And I think just generally, like you go to a blockchain space, not all blockchain spaces are created equal. Yes, more on that another time. But, you know, and you see that there's just a general energy of like, we're really committed to transforming the frameworks upon which our values ride upon and are exchanged. That feels critically important to me. And if I can support that by animating it with IRL projects and people who can really like benefit from these, you know, new frameworks, then like I'm totally here for it.
Right.
Just the quality of conversations are awesome. And there's a flexibility that I have not yet encountered in any other space that I've dwelled in. So, yeah.
Cool.
And you come from the more technical side and then went into the nature side. So I see we kind of have a little yin yang, two carps kind of swimming in a circle.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I love about collaborating together is we're very complementary in that we have different strengths. You know, and I think there's enough of the Venn diagram overlap where we can see each other and understand one another. Yeah. But that also, yeah, sometimes it's like, oh, such a relief. Sophia's got that. That's like really hard for me, or it feels impossible. Yeah. Including last night organizing the garden party. Someone asked me a rhetorical question the other day. They were like, if you had $1 billion, what would you do with it? I was like, I would talk to Matthew. That would be like maybe not my, you know, I will support Matthew's vision on it because I just, I feel like in a lot of trust. And I think also, you know, you and I had
been meeting in cities and kind of we've been in our traveling paths for years, but obviously coming and seeing your work at Mangaroa Farms in Aotearoa, New Zealand, like, and the relationships you've built there and the community that thrives there, you know, was like a nice verification metric for me to be like, oh, like Matthew really cares, you know, is really into the earth thing and knows that it ain't straightforward and easy too. You know, land projects are challenging. And when I talk about a land project, like you and I have both lived in different types of land projects, but I've also kind of moonlit as like a hippie living in communes over the years. It's a big surprise, I know. Yeah, I've always been really interested in like commune living and how there's kind of an internal grammar that begins to emerge with how we exchange value, how we vote on things, responsibility sharing. And even though, you know, a lot of these projects do fold within a few years, I really appreciate that diversity of social arrangement because, again, just that kind of isolated individuals floating around the world on whatever big missions to save the world kind of doesn't jibe. And I really do feel like rites of passage, relationship with land, developing relationship with sacred space, you know, even a sit spot, like where you see your birds come and flock and sleep in the trees. Like these are simple practices that begin to mend and tend the world together. And I like that that's in our shared vocabulary too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just wrapping up Climate Week, September 2025. We're building the app. We're doing our content series. For those who aren't fully attuned to our app, and we wouldn't expect you to be, but we're trying to bring together funders and land projects and impact evaluators into a shared, coherent platform that's interoperable with the rest of the REFI ecosystem. And we're doing this atop open source protocols. We're not trying to build our own protocol. We're trying to embrace and cultivate and support existing technologies, notably HyperCert's protocol and foundation and that work that Hoke is leading. And ultimately, the goal is to channel funds appropriately to these land projects and not just deliver the funds, but also to deliver it in a way that is respectful and responsible so that they have autonomy and sovereignty and privacy to govern those funds, but to also deliver to the funders what they need in terms of trust and transparency and impact accountability, and to give impact evaluators a business model, a way to participate, to support them in their objective evaluation in ways that honors the pluralistic numbers of mechanisms and worldviews that goes into this incredibly diverse body of work, if we use the word nature. And so very ambitious, but we've kind of narrowed down the scope to organize around these funding rounds once every 6 months, almost like a funding festival. Yes. This kind of communal gathering of supporting these nature stewards.
Right. Or the heartbeats, as you said.
The heartbeats, the seasons, the rhythms, that fits nicely within a kind of iterative technical development, product development philosophy. And so we hope, plan, aim to open for applications in early 2026 for the next round. We've done 2 pilot rounds on Gitcoin last year, and this will be, the next round we host on our own platform and user experience that hopefully feels really easy and like home for land and nature stewards. And you are, amongst your many hats, holding many of the relationships and cultivating many relationships with these land stewards coming in. And in this first round that we launch on maearth.com, we're not going to run an application process that just starts to select from scratch all of these different projects. We'll have a selection committee panel, trusted network of advisors, and they will be empowered to make these decisions about final curation. But what we honor are existing relationships and trust networks, because as we're starting out, the technology is still going to be a bit clumsy. We're still learning. We're still have lots of gaps in terms of our team and how much we can do at any given time and spinning all the plates. We're a little nonprofit startup. So, having those kind of trusted relationships is important from that vantage point. And it's also important because we want to set the right tone for the ecosystem. We want to set the right tone for the funders that will invite into this space and say, these are really high quality projects that you can feel good about. We want to set the right tone for all of our partners in the philanthropic, legal, and compliance ecosystems. When regulators and everyone can look at this and understand it and feel it and say, okay, this is something that's really important and valuable and in service. And so, that's a way of teeing up kind of the context of your relationship with these different land stewards and projects. And over these coming months, from when we publish this interview, one of our primary activities will be this cultivation in our little CRM system.
Our mighty CRM
our
system.
mighty CRM system, as we're just trying to bring sanity to our relationships. What else? How can people build those relationships with you? How is it best that we can have these conversations? And say more.
Yeah, totally. I love, so secret, when I look at Learning Lab registrations and I'll see who joins and I'll kind of I'll poke around. And, I often learn about epic teachers and land projects through the, people who register for Learning Lab. And I think a great way to stay in touch is just writing me at community@maearth.com. And right now, as you mentioned, we're looking for land projects that have some experience, not startup seed projects. It's not to say that's not critically important, but for this kind of phase that we're in, projects that already have, an established body of work, that have a relationship with their ecosystem, that hopefully has a rippling effect in their greater region, their bioregion. We're intentionally keeping some of those parameters open, because when you see a good land project, you just know it, right? As I've mentioned before, halophytic, sea water loving, farming of desert territories, that's awesome. Could I have written the specific things? Maybe not, so just leaving a lot of room open for creativity is really important to us. So again, diversity, we super value the different projects that are happening. And again, place-based, so at this time, we're not working on kind of trying to build the tracks for coordinating bodies, technologies, which again are critically important, but it's really I have a small, 5-hectare farm or whatever, smaller even. And we've been restoring watersheds after massive flooding in the region with different native species and supporting the regeneration of these critical waterways that support the hellbender mega, salamander of the southern Appalachian region. Great, we really, really want to support that kind of work. So leaving it open and just writing to community@maearth.com for any leads too. If you visited an amazing land project, if you have connections with them, we really want to reach out, be in touch. And I kind of have to pinch myself every morning and be wow, okay, I have a call with people in 5 different countries today, and we're just listening to the chickens clucking and seeing the sun rise over their mountains. And it's just such a funny time to be alive. And I feel super committed to being in service of just small, humble acts of loving land, really.
Yeah. Beautiful. And the cool thing about Learning Lab is, as we mentioned, it's recorded, and we know everyone can't always make it to every time zone. Right. And so we're trying to create this body of work that's referenceable. But if you attend live, then you get to ask questions of the speaker and engage more. And I guess that's part of the value proposition that brings it to life.
Yeah. Most people, again, we're super international, again, from New Zealand to Thailand to everywhere. But our Q&A at the end of the sessions is like very animated, and it's so exciting to then see people talking to each other and communicating. And, I'm sure the LinkedIn invitations are just going crazy behind the scenes. But yeah, the idea is basically that guests who come to the Learning Labs can ask questions live, and steer the direction of the conversation deeper. So we do leave like a generous Q&A at the end of our sessions.
Yeah. Any final words, Sophia?
Final words. Yeah. I mean, I think just acknowledging our context of like Climate Week, it's been like a long week. And it's funny to see how maybe it's like a PSA. Like I used to try to run to all of the panels. And now I'm like, sometimes the best thing I can do is really just have a very meaningful conversation with someone I already know and dig deeper. So for anyone, that's my Climate Week hack for you. Nothing wrong with panels, but I think like really just getting more less focused on these like big macro concepts and more on like relationship building. And that's just kind of my framework right now. It's like, we're still humans at the end of the day, and working with these big, grand, abstracted strategies and ideas, like it's good, but don't forget what it's really about, because I think that's what got us in a lot of trouble to begin with.
Right.
So, I really hope that we can continue to cultivate that space and folks can just like really feel like we're bringing in a family vibe here, frankly, because we're all learning on this journey together and we're just holding one piece of it and trying to make it a little more easeful for our relatives doing really important work out there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the PSA and for teaching me that and reminding me that. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been, a pleasure as always.
May the journey continue. That was Sophia Rokhlin. For more about Learning Lab, all of the offerings, just go to maearth.com. We'll see you there.